Vixen's back!
Hi everyone, I'm the Broken Meeple. Win or lose, I'm going to be honest with you, and yep, finally I get a chance to review this one. This is World Order, and for those of you who know about this game, it's done by the same people who do Hegemony. Hegemony, the game that I have ranked my second favourite game of all time. So yes, of course, I was interested to try this one out. However, it is a very different game to Hegemony in a lot of different ways. However, it's also going to be compared to Hegemony in various ways, as you'll see in the video. So there's definitely going to be references between the two. You'll just have to bear with me on that. If you want to check out my review for Hegemony, then by all means go check it out. There's a huge review for it that I did ages ago, and I talk about it a lot on other videos. But this one was essentially portrayed as kind of like not really a direct sequel to Hegemony. It was more meant to be a separate thing, but with that idea of here's 4 players that are slightly asymmetric, and what they do should influence another person. And influence being the key word here, because it's essentially an area majority game.
And there was much rejoicing.
Yeah, I have gone on record and said that out of all the mechanics that you can have in games, when you get to the bottom tier of mechanics, somewhere near the bottom of that is area control and area majority for me. It is not one of my favourite mechanics ever. It's usually quite bland when you see it in a lot of games. It's usually just a cube on a track or a guy in a map zone or something, and then a little bit of tug of war, and then eventually someone wins. It's, I don't know, something about that mechanic doesn't necessarily like grab me and say excitement, excitement, but I get that there's a lot of fans for it. But that being said, there are some area control, area majority games that I do get put my stock behind. But suffice to say, you know, knowing that this one was not going to be a direct sequel to Hegemony was like, oh well, but let's go in and see what's what. So this one has been getting a lot of buzz, a lot of praise. Certainly some interesting points have been repeated from time to time, and yeah, they're probably going to get repeated here as well. But I'm going to give you my honest thoughts from a base game only perspective. There's going to be 2 videos for this phase, effectively. Yeah, this is a review copy, so thanks for that. But they wanted me to do a video for just the base set retail edition. There's no deluxifying in here. This is all the base set, just the multiplayer base set version. So I'm not going to mention anything about the solo autumners. They come in an expansion. Same with the turmoil events. They're in a different expansion as well. I'll cover those in the Beyond the Base Game video at a later time when I've had a chance to actually play the solo modes. It's taken me long enough just to play this game enough multiplayer, you know, and that's not even just with this copy. It's this copy and other people's copies. It's not the easiest to get played, but we'll get onto that later. For now, let's talk about a quick overview.
Wingus, dingus, listen up.
So in World Order, you're here to get the most victory points. Well, go figure. It's a Euro game through and through. You play through 6 rounds, of which there is a scoring phase at the end of the 3rd and the 6th round, where basically all these different map regions on the board will score victory points based on who has the most cube control in that region, and there's effectively a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place for all of them. That's the crux of the game. You're getting cubes in these map regions so that you can get the most points when they eventually score. Players will take control of a particular nation. So in this case, I've got the European Union here with yellow. Oh, European Union, I miss you. But the idea with this is that it will have various resources that you will track on here. So food, diplomacy, mobile phones, you know, oil, stone, that kind of thing. And it will also have some production tracks where you can produce tanks to go off into different map regions and threaten other players, but also to help produce more resources on top of that. You will also have a hand of cards. You will start off with some basic cards that are slightly asymmetric for different players based on your faction, but during the game you will be able to sort of pseudo deck build to an extent by acquiring more cards and allowing them to do more powerful actions. These are basically what you use to do your turn. Each round you will do 4 turns by playing a card and resolving its effect. You can of course put it face down and pass, or instead you can play one of these strategic cards, which are basically sort of powerful effects. Each player gets 1 or 2 to have during the game, and basically it's just like, well, when I want to use it, I'll use it. But it's basically like a super card you trigger at a certain point in time. But for the most part, you will be utilizing these cards, your starter ones and ones that you buy. So on your turn, you basically choose one. So for example, I could pick one here and say, new allies, I improve relations with a country on the board. And then perform the improve relations action. It's all bolded on the card. We'll get into the actions in a minute. Once everybody has played 4 turns, the cards that are left in their hand will gain them bonuses based on the little symbols on the card, but they also give you research points, allowing you to buy more cards later. So there'll be more cards in the display and you'll be able to buy these based on their cost. So to start a round, first you're going to pick a focus. Each one of these focuses, domestic, diplomatic, or military, gives you some benefits to do with certain things. Like a military obviously makes it better for you to deal with tanks. You know, domestic allows you to produce better. Diplomatic allows you to do like diplomacy actions better. So it basically is, you know, which one of these do you want to use this turn? You will also have these ally cards in front of you. They're basically the regions of the different continents on the board. These allow you to perform the actions in the game better depending on where it is you're trying to influence in these regions. So the actions that you've got the diplomatic ones to improve relations or engage. Improve relations is how you get more of these cards. You essentially spend the diplomacy resource and grab one of these cards that are available on the display on the board and put it in front of you, and it's now another region that you can exploit for various ways. Engaging with an entire continent basically requires more of the diplomacy resource, but it allows you to put a cube in a region. And most of these actions will usually involve putting a cube in a region as part of the game is, well, area majority, go figure. Then you've got military actions. You're allowed to choose one of these regions where it's got a base symbol on it and your particular nation's flag, and you'll be able to build a military base there. This allows you to move tanks from your board that you've produced to that region and threaten areas on the board. These tanks basically make opponents lose VP if there's more tanks there than they have defense or other tanks. It's very much a pew-pew fighty-fighty thing, although you're not actually doing any legit shooting at each other in this game. It's just, I'm here, I have presence, lose points. So if you're looking for a pew game, you're not getting that here. Then you can also move tanks around the board, so you basically just pay money and move tanks around. That's essentially the military actions. Then you've got the economic actions of invest and trade. So invest is the easier one. Basically, one of your cards that you have in front of you, you can pay the money and place a token on there, which means that at the end of every round, you basically get more money back based on investing in that country. But of course, you also put a cube on the board because that's the name of the game. You've then got trading. Now, trading is the long action that you have here. Trading basically lets you export and import different resources. So every player has a particular card that dictates how many of these they can do. Each player also has cards in front of them that dictate the resources that players can take off them without them losing any from their storage. Otherwise, they might actually have to lose one of theirs from storage, but they'll get the money, but, did I want to use the resource for something else? Instead, you can use the various allied countries that you've got and import and export from these. So you basically get to do several trades, buying and selling resources, get resources in, pay the money, sell resources, earn money. It's very much like that. And then you finally got the domestic actions. You've got growth cards and produce. So produce is, well, what do you think produce is? Based on your production tracks, you will produce more resources. The growth cards are essentially an extra thing that you can upgrade. So think of it like an upgrade card, a special ability. Basically, as you go through the game, you'll be able to buy more expensive versions of these. They have a resource cost and a money cost as well. They'll get you victory points, but they also get you either an immediate bonus or some ongoing effect. So you can grab these as the game goes on, and you have to start at the bottom and work your way up to the sort of more powerful ones. And that's essentially the 8 actions that you have. You will use the card 4 times in a round to do those various actions in the game. And most of them are going to put cubes on the board, of which you've got permanent and temporary influence. Permanent sticks around for the game. Temporary can eventually erode away, but it can get you some early game VP. So, what do you want to do? And it's all about getting to that round 3 and round 6 scoring phase when you are in a position where, right, I can score a bunch of points in the scoring phase, I control a bunch of these regions, there we go, and you do this twice, and at the very end of the game, count up all the points, and of course, the one with the most.
Of course!
We'll go on to the pros first. So first off, production quality, pretty sound actually. I mean, it's not a cheap game. You're paying about £50 for this as a standard UK price, and this is the retail version, but honestly, I kind of feel like the retail version's good enough. The deluxe version can give you miniatures for things like the tanks. Honestly, who cares? I've seen the miniatures, and frankly, I think the wooden pieces are better, honestly. But also, you get a couple of other little things that are deluxe mode, and yes, you can get metal coins in that, and the coins are probably, the weakest component in here other than the cubes, because it's basically just cardboard money, but It's still pretty thick, chunky cardboard. They're easy to denote, and I suspect a lot of people are just using the poker chips with this anyway to use as money as, you know, as a sort of alternative. But you've got giant cubes, you have got chunky resource pieces, you have got a dual layer board that, you know, doesn't slide around and things don't get loose. You've got a lot of cards, and they are pretty decent card stock. You've got decent kind of almost like that sort of photographic-y artwork on them, a bit like we get in Arc Nova and stuff like that. And of course, you've got 4 players worth of all these pieces. You know, so there's a decent amount of content in the game for your £50. There's no quality insert as such. The insert is just basically a bunch of cubby holes for all the cards and a few of the like pieces, but you don't have a proper insert. You have to buy like the bigger version, that deluxeified version, to get any kind of insert. But again, I don't think you desperately need it. This game actually has the advantage of being one of the easier games to set up. You know, when you've only got the base game and you're not using all the other sort of the optional variants from the expansions and stuff, basically main thing you're setting up is these country cards, which are just, you know, separated into their various regions. You give everybody their starting, you know, allied countries and, where are they? Yeah, you know, these particular cards, which all have their flag on them. Everybody gets their board and sets themselves up with their tracks, which are already color-coded on there to tell you how much you have, so it's relatively easy for a player to figure it out even before you explain it. And after that, you're kind of good to go. It's not, I thought it would be a much longer period to set this game up, and compared to something like a Gemini, which takes a fair whack to set up, you really want to do that in advance, this one can be on the table relatively quickly. Now, don't be fooled by this board, it is still quite a table hog. You know, you have this board, which is pretty small, but then you've got this board. Then you've got space for all your cards and your pieces and, you know, this big player aid and stuff. So it's like, you know, the game is still going to demand a fair bit of your table, but it's not as ridiculous as some other games lately. The game also, surprisingly, is not a difficult learn, at least relatively. You know, there are people online who will say that this is a quick and easy and zippy game. We'll get to some of that a bit later. But, you know, this game is not a light game. It's not a medium game.
Great Scott. I know, this is heavy.
But the fact of the matter is that compared to a lot of heavy games, this one doesn't have as much of a front-loaded teach as a lot of these other ones. Yeah, you know, I might have shown you a player aid with a bunch of text on it, but, you know, some of this is literally just like round overview and like the end of the round, which is not, you know, that big a deal, but, you know, it's pretty easy to remember it. You won't even need to read the aid after so long. But the action step very clearly tells you how all the actions in the game work, and it's all just on one side of a sheet. It's a fair amount of text, yes, but it's clear, it makes sense, and if you just follow the steps, it's, you know, a good way of doing it. I probably would have preferred if they did it like a kind of bullet point list, like a step 1, step 2, step 3. For example, take the Gallerist from Vital Lacerda. That one had a very good player aid where it really did do a step-by-step guide of the turns. That might have improved it slightly, but you know what? I'm not going to knock it. It gave you a decent player aid, and this game kind of needs it. But even the rulebook is still pretty decent. I have to reach over here and grab it. Here we go. So it may look like a lot. 20 pages might sound like a lot. And annoyingly, nothing on the back, you know, wasted real estate. But over those 20 pages, I mean, a couple of them is like, you know, just FAQ and credits. And then you've got about 4 at the start of the game, which is mostly just showing off the, you know, what is that? Big picture with a bit of fluff. You know, the actual components list is 2 pages. And then you've got basically some basic anatomy for 2 pages. The setup, 2 pages. So out of your 20 pages, you've already kind of used half of them, and that's not even for anything major that you can't follow. So you're only left, oh look, another picture. So there's another page used up. When it all's said and done, there is not a lot of pages in this book devoted to the actual rules of the game. This is basically it. And as much as there is a lot of text, a lot of that text is concealed within examples. So if you were to take the examples out and just read it without it, wouldn't take you that long. And the actions themselves are not particularly complicated in how they work. You just have a lot of them, so there's a decent amount of choice. But this book goes into good detail with the different actions that you can do, and there is a lot of pictorial examples in here. Every single one of the actions has at least 1, if not 2, fully explained actions with the picture, diagram, and the full text of what is going on. So by the time you get through this book, you will have a pretty good understanding of how to play this game. That being said, it's definitely a game that's easier for players to grok if someone is teaching it. If you try to learn this from the book with, you know, 3 new players here, not only are you going to be here for a while, but you're probably maybe going to struggle in that sense. This game does certainly benefit from someone maybe trying to integrate the theme into the teach and go for it that way. But yeah, I thought like this was going to be, you know, a smorgasbord or a front-loaded teach or anything like some of the Lacerdas or Minecraft games can be. I mean, Revenant, for example, you know, pretty front-loaded teach there. But this one, honestly, for a heavy game is, I don't want to say the word streamlined because it's, you know, that's maybe going a bit far, but it's smoother. It's got a smoother rule set than a lot of heavy games. So you're able to get through the teach in a quicker time and just get on with the game.
Are we there yet?
So some of the specific mechanics that are quite cool. I like the card system. I do wish there was a bit more of a deck building element to it though, because it's more akin to something like Lost Ruins of Arnak than it is, you know, a proper deck builder here. Because you start off with a few cards and you'll play most of them, but you'll have a couple left and then you'll discard those anyway. You'll then draw from your little mini deck of cards, but obviously the ones that you buy will be inclusive. However, what you buy goes on top of your deck. So similar to the one where it goes on like the top of the discard pile in Arnak, you're kind of guaranteed to get the cards that you bought next turn to use them, so at least you're prepared for it. But after that, that's kind of where the deck building part really ends, because there are very few ways in the game to actually manipulate the cards in your deck. There's only so many times you can draw a card, and there's even fewer times that you can trash a card, and you only have 6 rounds in the game anyway, so it's not like you really see the effects of any deck building things that you can do in the game, and that is a bit of an annoyance, but it is cool to have a selection of cards that do different things, and you have not only the choice of what action you want to do, but also that little niggling thought of, well, when I get to the end of this round, I'm going to need to think about 2 cards in my hand that I'm going to keep, and I was like, well, what am I after here? Well, those research cards look pretty good, but at the moment, the only ones that actually give me a lot of research are these 2. Well, do I need to play one of those? In which case, what am I sacrificing here? And yeah, that decision is good as a kind of like a reminder throughout the round. But I like the card system. You've got a little bit of asymmetry between players where they kind of lean into their own aspects, but they are mostly the same. But then when you get these new ones here, you do have quite a selection of cards to pick from. And I can't recall if they are, no, they're not all unique, but there's still a decent amount of them here, so you have a good amount of variety in each game. I do wish that maybe the display reset a little bit more, because in a 4-player game, the display doesn't reset. So once you've, you know, taken all your cards, any stagnant ones there that nobody wants kind of just remain there for the whole game and clog up room. They actually do discard off the end in a 2- and 3-player game, and honestly I think you should house rule that it does it in a 4-player game as well. It's not like it's unbalancing things, it just keeps a bit more variety in the game, so why would you not do that?
Of course! It's so simple!
The strategic resource cards, you know, again, a bit of a nice touch there. The ultra powerful cards, you'll have 1 or 2 of them at the start of the game, at the ending, and you basically have a choice of when to do these, and they can do some pretty significant things, but you're deciding when it is you're doing it. You've just got this little secret weapon here that you get to use, and you know, you'll have, you know, maybe different ones each game to use, and so those can play into your strategy or just be a nice bonus, or you can just ignore them entirely. You know, you have that choice. The game scales from 2 to 4 players, and the 2-player and the 3-player basically have this system where you have these auto-influence cards. So in those cases, whichever powers, like nation superpowers, you're not using, you flip over one of these cards and they give you, you put the cubes for those nations on there, and basically at the end of the round you put those cubes on the board and maybe some tanks as well. So I mean, if I flip this one here, let's say I'm playing China and Russia, am I allowed to do that in the game? Well, whatever. Yeah, let's say USA and China. That makes more sense. So EU and Russia would put cubes on. One goes in North Africa, one goes in Europe, tank goes there. So it tells you what to do. And it's not a perfect simulation of other players, but it does mean that the map at least clogs up with other cubes, so it's not just simply a 2-person race. So the game can scale at least for 2 and 3 players to make sure that the area majority aspect of the game doesn't, you know, change. You don't have to flip the board over for a 2-player setup or anything like that. You know, the opposite end of this board is entirely blank. There is nothing else there. It's just this map. And I kind of like that. I hate having to sort of flip the board all the time thinking, oh, hang on, did I set it up with the 3-player side? Oh, for crying out loud. It's nice that you've just got a very simple card system. The game's certainly a thinky one as well. You are going to have to plan ahead in this, and the turns that you make have consequences, because influencing a particular region is going to affect what other players may decide they want to do in said region. But then investing in certain, region cards, it's going to get you money as the game goes on and have other benefits, but it's like, it costs you a bit of money up front. What are you going to do? You're going to think the long term with this. The cards that you buy, that you think you're going to buy in the research phase, you're going to need them next round. You better have the prerequisites to do it, otherwise you just wasted your time buying the things. You really do need to make use of them. But the game also allows you to do kind of what you want to do in the game, up to a point. I'll get to that in the negatives, but you have 8 different actions, and kind of focused around 4 key things: economy, military, domestic, and diplomacy. And you can kind of influence these regions based on your strength in whichever areas you kind of want to do. If you are building a Chinese economic powerhouse, then fine. Most of your cubes on the board will come from investing, and you'll do a decent amount of trading and maybe a little diplomacy on the side. Perhaps you just won't be that big on the military. But then EU, chances are, will do more diplomacy actions. The Russia will do more military, and America is kind of, a few things. But the idea is that, yes, you can do anything in the game, really, no matter what nation you are. And to an extent that works. You do ideally want to play to the strengths of your faction, otherwise you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage. But it's nice that you do have a little bit of variety. You don't have to stick constantly to just one of those actions and that's it for the entire game. Occasionally you can pivot, occasionally you can do other stuff, and it adds to the amount of options that you have. There's always a decent amount of options on each turn. It's just a case of, which one do I want to do? And some of that is dictated by the cards in your hand, and we'll get to that negative a little later on, but for the most part you should be fine to have at least a few options available to you as to, I really want a cube there, what's the best way I can do it? Well, I could do this, or I could do this. Usually you're not just left with only one thing you can do, and it's a sucky option.
Well, that was pointless.
But there's just a few other nice little decisions you got to make every now and again. I mean, I particularly like the whole, I always like this in games where you got to pick a focus for a round. You have this one choice at the start of a round that's going to help you in certain ways, maybe hinder you in others, and you've got to decide, well, which one of those do I want? Is it diplomacy focus? Is it military focus? What is it I need? And maybe you'll just focus on 1 or 2 of them for the whole game. But sometimes it's like, well, I'm getting screwed over tank-wise in a couple of areas. I need to get some tanks. You know what? It's time to switch to military. And then you get said bonuses or other things that you can do with a step-by-step guide as to what you're doing. And I just like that extra little choice, something else to think about, which is going to affect you for the round. This game is definitely a thinky one. It's a heavy game through and through, but not to the point of feeling, I would say, overwhelmed with rules. You might be overwhelmed with options, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but, for the most part, you should be there with a decent amount to plan ahead for. Okay, on to some of the negatives, and there was a decent amount of good stuff to talk about. There's also a few negatives to talk about as well. Firstly, the theme. Now, some people are going to get on my case about this, and I'm a big lover of theme, and I'm fine with the theme setting in this game, the whole geopolitical theme. I mean, I didn't expect to like the theme in the Gemini, and I like that one, even though I'm not really a political person. But the theme in this one, compared to Gemini, and this is probably where the comparisons to Gemini are also going to start coming more in the negatives here, the theme in the Gemini is a lot stronger. It comes through really strong in that game. Like, you can bite chunks of the theme. It's so strong there. Here, though, it does feel a bit more abstracted in my opinion. There are some people out there who think this is like one of the most thematic games they've ever played. I can sort of see that in some respects, but at the end of the day, it's mostly about putting cubes on tracks. Regardless of whether you're investing or diplomacy or doing a military thing or whatever, it's still essentially putting a cube on a track, and the whole geopolitical theme in that kind of gets lost in that. When I play an invest card, I'm basically just putting a token on a card, putting a little piece on the board, or putting a cube on a track. And when your mechanics are boiled down to such a degree in that sense, the theme I just don't think comes through enough. The cards that you play, they say like new allies, growth strategy, global currency, humanitarian aid. But there's only so much you get from that as well. I mean, military reinforcements gets you tanks. Well, go figure. Yes, the title matches the card. But, humanitarian aid, improve relations with the country on the board, it's fairly generic in its, ability and title. It's just, that's what it is. Having different region cards doesn't really change up much. I mean, whether I have Mexico or Peru or Venezuela or Argentina, it doesn't really matter. The only thing that slightly changes is a cost value, or a value for taking discounts on actions, which I forgot to mention in the overview. You can basically exhaust these cards in order to get discounts on various actions, which is pretty cool. But mainly it's just what you can import and export. So unless you've got an intricate knowledge of what you can import and export from various places in the world, I don't think that's going to come through as a major theme thing. So I get that some people are getting a theme from this, but I just don't get it as strongly. Certainly nowhere near as strongly as Hegemony. That one definitely has much more theme than this one. For me, this one feels more closer to a Euro game, in the same sense that when I talk about Revenant, sometimes I mention that one's got a much stronger theme for what it is compared to something like Voidfall, where Voidfall doesn't really feel like a space game to me. It just feels like a massive Euro game. Well, that's what this kind of feels like. It's essentially Twilight Struggle Plus. That's what the game boils down to. It's cubes on tracks, play a few cards, it's Twilight Struggle with some extra steps. And so that theme doesn't really come through for me.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
I mentioned some of the random elements as well. This game doesn't have a huge amount of luck in it, but this game, as we say later on, is a little on the long side, so it does make more of a difference with the random elements. And some of them can be a little bit critical, mostly to do with the cards that you get, because you don't have many ways to actually do anything with the cards or manipulate your deck in any way. And in 6 rounds, you're not really going to notice the effect of trashing a card or anything like that. So after your first turn, you will essentially draw a bunch of cards in your deck, and depending on what you started with, you may just end up with a bunch of cards that don't let you do the actions that you critically need. It's a bit like the problem I had with Brass and Brass Birmingham and stuff, where, I really need to do something in a particular location. I've only got so much stuff to do it with, and, I don't have the card, in which case I'm slightly screwed. Well, this one has a similar problem. If you don't have the card to do an improve relations action when you really want to do it, then, well, tough. You can't improve relations. You don't get a choice in the matter. Now, there is a little variant in the book that lets you use an executive order card, which is basically almost a bit like a get out of jail free card. You play it and you can do any action in the game as a one-off. I think you should throw that into every game, frankly, because you need it for those critical times when you must do something really important, and luck of the draw basically said, nope, you don't get to do that today. Sod off, I've got an executive order. It's a much better way of doing it. But then there's also the order in which the growth cards comes out and display. I mean, if you're 3rd or 4th in a 4-player game, you might as well just turn your head away and sort of look back. Eventually that display will reset it, and okay, is it my turn to choose now? And you may just end up with a bunch of cards that you cannot really make use of. So what is the point in really buying them? Yes, you can spend resources to reset the display, but A, it's resources, and this is quite a tight game for resources, but also you find that you're actually more just helping the opponents out when you do that rather than yourself. Because you may still turn over a bunch of cards that aren't that useful to you, but then the opponent's like, oh, that's pretty nice, I'll have that one then. It's like, well, that was worth it. These things do tend to prop up, and this is the nature of the beast when you use any kind of deck building element in the game, even a pseudo deck building, and other games like Arnak and Dune Imperium and that are certainly not strangers to the issues that these carry, but it's not dramatically a problem here. It does pop up and linger. Sometimes you want a particular ally region and they just don't seem to appear. I really need to have a base in this particular area. Well, annoyingly, Africa, the Americas doesn't give me a base card anytime soon. So sometimes you are gunning for something to come up and it just doesn't. But it's not as bad as some other games I've mentioned in the past, like Civolution, for example, for my overrated games list, where that one has critical luck issues in that one. This one isn't anywhere on that kind of level. There's a couple of little minor aspects to the game that, kind of irk me a little bit, much like, a few good aspects here and there. One little aspect I'm not a fan of is the way the tanks work. The tanks are kind of the dicking over other players situation. Because when you do an action in this game, you get a little bonus, something happens, you think, oh, okay, things have improved. But the tanks basically are a means of depressing other players. Because the way they work is that you put the tanks in a region, and if you have more tanks than the other player, who is basically, that's their home region, they lose -2 VP for every player that has more attack in that region than they do. Losing VP in a game never feels good. It's never something that gets you like, oh yeah, I'm excited, or this is brilliant. No, it sucks. It's a depressing thing. And it does two things. Firstly, it just feels like kind of a dick move by players. It's like, yep, I'm going to put tanks in this region, I'm going to make it lose VP, haha. Oh, great. Well, you know, whatever. And VP is not exactly abundant in this game, so losing a decent amount of VP to those tanks can outright cripple you from the game entirely if you're not careful. But also, it kind of pigeonholes you into having to deal with the tanks at some point. So as much as I say, yeah, you can do, like, focus a little bit on domestic, or focus a bit more on diplomacy, or focus a bit more on military, you can't ignore the military. You could ignore some of the other aspects to some extent and do reasonably well. You know, you might do the odd invest every now and again, but you don't have to, you know, do a lot of it. You could just ignore it and just think, you know what, I'm just going to do diplomacy for the most part. I'll get my money in other ways. I'll trade. But if you ignore tanks, you will lose. Because other people will have tanks, particularly Russia, and they will just march into your locations and you will end up losing VP. And the VP that you lose from a combination of multiple players just having more attack than you in regions will just wipe you from the game entirely. So you're forced to deal with the tanks thing. And I don't like the fact that the game forces you into that. It's pigeonholing you into must-do tanks. And then you can do what you like from the rest. It's like, I would have liked it if it was very much more optional. I just think the tank should do something other than, you know, -2 VP. Make it easier to put a cube out or something. Or maybe it nerfs one of your cubes or something. I don't know, but it just feels a little bit too dickish.
Does anyone want to get out?
Right, that elephant has been showing itself every now and again. Yes, let's attack the elephant in the room. This game's got, so far, more good than bad points. But there is one thing about this game that is its critical Achilles heel. And this is going to make or break it for people. And yeah, the length. The length of this game. Hegemony is not a short game by any means, right? 4 hours is usually a typical time frame for Hegemony with a 4-player count. It's a long game. This one is anywhere between usually 3.5 to 6 hours.
This man is overgasped.
I am not joking. I mean, the box cover says 120 to 180.
Yeah, in your bra.
You'll be friggin' lucky to achieve that. I mean, 120 minutes for 2 players is still going to be tricky in itself. Bear in mind that this is not catering for solo yet, because there's an expansion to deal with that aspect. It thinks that you're going to do a 4-player game in 3 hours. If, and I mean if, you have the exact same people played it every single time, each one of them knows the game inside out, you have already assumed that the setup is not included in that time. I know it's not a long setup, but still, you're not including any kind of setup or teach in that time period, right? And you play this game in such a way that you just don't talk, you have no analysis paralysis whatsoever, and you pretty much don't even engage in conversation for the most part. If you're like that, then you probably could get a 4-player game done of this in 3 hours, but believe me, you are a minority in this. People on all the Facebook groups are on here saying, I love this game, or I like this game, or I played this game, whatever, and their time lengths are anywhere between 3.5 to 6 hours. It's crazy. You play this with new players, particularly anybody who's remotely, even remotely AP prone, and this game will slow down to a friggin' crawl. Now, you're probably thinking, well, hang on, Hegemony's 4 hours, you don't seem to have a problem with that one. The problem that this one has compared to Hegemony, though, is its interaction element and the length of downtime. Hegemony has a ton of interaction in it. Everything somebody does in there, the middle class, working class, whatever they do, it's going to affect multiple players at the same time in fundamental ways. In fact, it will directly influence them. It's like, oh, you're doing that, right? Well, okay, I'll do that. Okay, right, I need to. All right, that's a big deal. That's changed the whole like scope of the board. We've done an instant vote for the getting more of the welfare state. And it's like, okay, well, that's just changed things. Okay, yeah, it's fundamental, the stuff that happens here. It's so interactive and it's very engaging. Very little downtime in Hegemony, because you've also got things like negotiations and stuff like that you're doing with other players and a lot of banter. This game doesn't really have any of that.
I beg to differ, sir.
Hear me out. I mentioned the actions before. You know, in Hegemony, you do these actions and they really directly influence the entire board in a massive way and other players at the same time. So you can't really just sit back and zone out. You really need to be paying attention. Here though, that's not the case, because some of the actions that you're doing are basically just, I do this little thing by myself and I put a cube on a board. Yay. Now, if that cube happens to be somewhere that is critically important for a particular player because it overtakes them in influence or something, then they may care that you just did that. But there's so many regions on this board, you cannot possibly do well in all of them, so you're going to leave some of them out entirely, and as a result, there are times where you might have 2 or 3 people like involved in a little war in a particular region, or 2 people are in this region, 2 people are in this region, and they put cubes down in those regions, and I'm like, I could not care less. You know, yeah, fine, put your cubes down in Europe. I'm not touching Europe this game. I've got things to do in Asia and stuff like that. So whatever you're doing in Europe, I couldn't really care. But can you hurry up with your turn, please? Turns are not typically that zippy in this game, as some people will claim. I've heard people say this game has zippy turns. They are high as a freaking kite. You know, in this one, you know, the turns, if you've got anybody remotely AP prone, they're going to be thinking a long time trying to think about the ramifications of their turns. And some of these actions are certainly quicker than others. The trade action, my god, that takes forever. You know, there are certain like people here, they can do 2 if not 3 imports and exports, and you've got to do different resources and you can do them with different players, and yeah, you might think, well, that's interaction, isn't it? We're literally talking that there's a card in front of you, and where's one of these cards? Here you go. There's like a card in front of you, and it's like, oh, I want to buy a phone from you. Okay. That's the interaction. You know, you might have a resource that they want, they can buy 1 of it off you. Yay. I mean, that's the level of interaction from trading. How the hell do you make trading mostly non-interactive? That's quite a feat.
This bloke won't haggle.
Won't haggle?
Yeah, the trade action takes a player forever to finish. It's like, God's sake, we hurry up and trade. And so you're waiting quite a while before it gets back around to your turn, and yes, you're trying to plan for some things, but yeah, you're waiting for it. And a lot of the times, you know, if you're going to invest on your cards and put a cube there, and I don't care where it is, whatever. You know, if you're going to do a trade, you know, tell me if I need to flip a card, but otherwise, you trade and do you. You know, it's not that big a deal. You're going to grab a growth card? Well, fine, grab a growth card. You know, see if I care. You know, they don't have anywhere near as much impact on each other as the other ones. So the interaction is there, but only as far as a typical area majority game goes, which is I put a cube on a place that you might be interested in, therefore do I want to put a cube on there as a follow-up or something. You know, that's as far as it goes. And yet, this wants the same, if not more time than hegemony takes to play. That's insane. And when it all boils down to it, as I said before, you're doing area majority. Not one of the most exciting mechanics in the world. It's Twilight Struggle Plus. You're putting cubes on tracks and scoring VP for having the most cubes on the track. That is a game that works in a 90-minute fashion. Maybe 2 hours if you're going to do a heavy Euro game with it. 4 to 6 hours, though, is just freaking ridiculous. This game only has 6 rounds. The rounds take forever, and when you get later into the game, it takes even longer because it snowballs to accrue. It's like it's snowballs rolling uphill rather than downhill, and so you know the mechanics that you do in this game in this game compared to something like Hegemony just don't warrant that time frame. In Hegemony, they do for 4 hours. I forget how long the time has passed. It's like, oh yeah, I'm all doing all these things, but this is massive, and the story's being told, and you remember, and it's super thematic, dripping with theme. Here, though, it's mostly abstracted, and I don't get stories from this. You know, you're not telling war stories about how somebody had a little tussle in Asia with tanks against each other. I guess, you know, maybe you can do, but you know, you might pick up a little few snippets like that, but you're not going to get an overarching game narrative in this one compared to something like Hegemony for, you know, the time frame that it demands from you. And certain other parts of the turn, I mean, that research phase, oh my word. 4 players with that research phase. I swear, out of the 5-6 hours that you could be playing this game for, I swear an hour and a half of that is literally just the research phases where you buy more cards, because you've got a decent amount of text on these cards, you know, a fair amount to read, symbology and everything, and you've got about 6 or 7 of them in a display. They're going to be, you know, not the right sort of orientation for somebody who's got to look over them and do it, but anybody who's not very good at reading fast is going to be doing the classic thing where I swear the last demo I had of this at Games Expo had you know, a couple of people who are these sort of classic players. Right, so there's a bunch of the cards there, and they've got to go.
Well, we're waiting.
Now, I'm not a patient man, you know, by any stretch of the word, but seriously, if you're the sort of person who does that and you're playing this game with me as a new boy, I am going to send the nukes. Forget the tanks, I'm going to send the nukes to your location. Because God, does that drag out the research phase. Especially when they're going first or second in the turn order. Because you can't look at that display when you're third or fourth in player order, because all the cards are going to be completely different practically by the time you get there. Because a couple of them will be bought by other people. So you're waiting for them to hurry up and choose, and it's just... get a friggin' move on. And there's just too much element of downtime in this compared to something like Hegemony where I am not at downtime at all. I'm planning my turn and maybe I'm waiting for it to get back round, but I'm still interested in what they're doing. It's like, come on working class, what are you doing? Hey, are you gonna put those guys out? Are you gonna try and get into that company? Are you gonna, you know, mess around with the welfare state? I mean, we could discuss that, and I'm already engaged with them and it's not even my turn. There's no negotiation in this. You don't do any kind of discussion. You're basically, you know, for hell, you barely even talk to each other in this game for the most part. You could play this in mostly silence and still get the same experience. Maybe that's how some people play it in only 3 hours. I don't know, but it's just that length bit is a problem, and this is going to be a make or break thing for players. You know, because, you know, if you could play this in 2 hours with a 2-player game and use the auto-influence cards, then you actually get a pretty decent experience, and 2 hours is fine, but even then I've struggled to get this played in, you know, 2 hours with 2 players. It's just, you know, unlikely to happen. But really, to get the most out of this game, you want the full batch of 4. It scales fine with 2 to 3, but you really want 4. Problem is, that comes with the price of the time length. And it's so difficult to get it down to the 3 hours unless you have that perfect scenario. This is a game you're not going to get out often. You're going to get out at conventions, and that is it. Yes, that's all I do with Hegemony. But, you know, I accept that with Hegemony. But as I say, it's more the fact that, you know, before people get on my case, why do you love this one and, you know, you're ragging on this one for it, it's what the game gives you for the investment. Hegemony gives you so much for the investment, such an intricate design. This one gives you, you know, a decent amount of stuff, but for that investment time, it doesn't give you enough. You know, if I play a game of this with 4 players in 3 hours, I will consider that to be a result. I'll also consider that the stars have aligned, or I've sold my soul to Cthulhu because something went wrong in the cosmos in order for the game to only take 3 hours with 4 players. But I'm the sort of person who ends up teaching a lot of these games. I'm not playing this game constantly with people who know the game inside out. People want to learn it. Friends want to learn it. Somebody at the game club wants to try it. In which case, I'm going to be teaching new players. And as soon as you throw new players into the mix, it not only upsets the balance a little bit, because obviously they're not knowing how to play their faction correctly, but also the time length exponentially increases to compensate. And it's just that's his Achilles heel. It's a big deal. It's a big issue. I wish that they could have condensed it down. If they managed to get it to 2 to 3 hours, no matter what, then I think this would have been like, okay, you've got the perfect length for this kind of game. But for a game where you're basically just putting a cube on the track, which, let's be honest, putting cubes on the track is not the most exciting thing in the world. That length is a problem, and it's talked about in a lot of groups. BGG, Facebook, you go online and everybody's talking about it. You get a few people who are high as a kite who don't understand how time passing works and think that you can play this in 2.5 hours with 4 players. Ignore them, frankly. I'm sorry, just ignore them. I'm done trying to accept that that is a possible thing. Show me a timestamp video of you playing this with 4 players in 2.5 hours, and let's see what your group's dynamic is like to get it done in that time. But realistically, you know, the ones who say it's taking them 4 hours and 5 hours to play this game, 6 is pretty extreme, but we're talking 3.5 to 5.5 hours as the range here. 3.5 is still pushing it, but I'll accept 3.5 with 4 players, but even then I'm going to be checking the watch. But any more than that, and I'm just like, why have I committed to this long a game for this? And it's not that the game is bad, it certainly isn't. For the most part, it's actually really good mechanics. But the length for what you get, it's a problem. Because also I'm going to be comparing this to Hegemony. You know, it's like, right, what do I want to play today? Do I want to play Hegemony or do I want to play World Order? You ask me that question before I even get to the verdict. Of course I'm going to play Hegemony, hands down. I've got 4 hours spare and we're going to play one of these 2 games. I'm going to pick Hegemony in a heartbeat.
So you have chosen death.
So World Order is a toughie. there is definitely, if we talk from a purely mechanical standpoint, mechanics of the game, there is a lot more good than bad here. I like the card play. There's a little niggle with the deck building aspect of it, but I like the card play. I like that the rule set is not a front-loaded, like, massive teach. I like that the player aid is really sound. I like that the rulebook is really good and clear. I like the production quality for a £50 retail edition. In fact, I just don't think you even need to bother with the deluxe version. I think that this version is perfectly good for what you're going to get. It's, you know, more than enough for me personally. Wooden pieces beat miniatures in my opinion. But, you know, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. You're certainly getting a lot of meaty decisions. You're getting a lot of options. There's a decent amount of variety. You know, games can play out very differently based on players and cards and factions. There's a lot of good stuff here. The theme, not as strong as I would like it to be. The interaction, also not as strong as I would like it to be. I mean, it's not devoid of either of those two things, but again, compare it to Hegemony. I know they're two different games, but it's the same publisher and it's the same massive investment with a ton of stuff and political themes and stuff. It's going to get compared. But yeah, that one just has a lot more of both of those aspects than this one does, because this one still boils down to the abstracted concept that you are putting cubes on tracks for area majority. It's not that exciting a concept. Twilight Struggle wasn't an exciting game, and this one again has good mechanics, but at no point do I ever feel that excited playing it. But you know, with the good aspects overwhelming the bad, for sure, that niggling problem, the elephant in the room, the length of this game, it's an absolute killer for this. And I don't know how to kind of go about rating it, because it, you know, I've got to bear in mind I'm not including the solo mode in this. You know, the solo mode could be a saving grace, and I've heard good things about the solo mode. Mark Dainty's done a lot of stuff on this, so by all means check out his views on it. But the solo mode could be really cool. You play against automners. Could they simulate the players well enough? Could they allow me to play this in a much shorter space of time and still get the juicy stuff with all the cards and that? We'll see in a different video. But I've got to base this solely on multiplayer. As a two-player game, you don't get as much of the cool area to control back in, the cool area control. You don't get as much of the interplay with the regions as you do in a four-player game. But at least you can play this in two-player in a reasonable amount of time. It's still long, but it's a reasonable amount of time. To play this at its best player count of 4 requires you to invest a ton. You need a lot of time, and it's too much time for what it is. You know, yes, you know, there are some people out there who clearly don't have a lot of other hobbies, or clearly just have way too much time on their hands and have no problem sinking 6 hours into a game, one single game, and having it take that long. I do have a problem with that though. You know, I'm very picky with games that take that long. You know, and it just really means that if I'm going to play this multiplayer, the only time I'm ever going to get it played, realistically, to a point where I'm going to enjoy it, is playing this at a convention with people who know the game inside out, who don't need any teach whatsoever, who aren't analysis paralysis pro. I mean, I've got to set a checklist of criteria here before this game gets to its, admittedly, pretty high note. But it never reaches a high note as high as Hegemony. Hegemony is still the daddy of these two. I mean, Hegemony is my second favorite game of all time. I love this freaking game. World Order isn't even in the same continental postcode, whatever. It is not even on the same planet. It's on a different world compared to Hegemony for me. But I get that for people, there's going to be a group of people there who just clearly, like I say, have too much time on their hands and everything. They don't care about the length. It's not going to bother them. And for them, they're going to really enjoy this game, and I can see why, because the mechanics are solid. Even though it's area majority cubes on tracks, the mechanics are still solid, and there's a lot of other good bits besides. That length is such a killer though. I think I've got to be brutally honest. For me personally, I've got to say the game averages out at, I would say, I've got to give it I gotta be tough love. I gotta give it a 6 out of 10. It's above average. I was debating, do I still give this the seal of recommendation? And I would say the rating actually goes up with, I think, it's hard to say. I mean, I think for fewer players, for me, the rating goes up, because as much as it is a better game overall with 4 players, that length is just such a killer that it puts me off it. But I would say for me, that length just kills this game too much for me. You know, for what it is you're getting, there is none enough theme, interaction, or, you know, like excitement in the game or engagement to keep me wanting to play this for 5 hours or something, you know, not compared to something like a Hegemony where you're constantly engaged. Here, there's downtime, there's, you know, quiet periods, you're doing something and I couldn't really care less while you're doing it. Those aspects mean that you shouldn't be spending 5 hours to play this. If they can find a way later to really shorten this game, then I'm listening. Really listening. And I look forward to getting this out with the solo autumners and giving this like a massive blasting solo, because that could be the saving grace for this. Much like Voidfall, as much as I rag on that one, I accept that if you're willing to put up with the investment, the time and rules and that, the solo is still the best way to play it. Here though, the multiplayer is just really hampered by those length issues and some of those other niggles. So 6 out of 10, still above average. That does not make it a bad game by any means. It makes it still a solid game, and one that occasionally you're going to get me to play, even though I know how long it's going to take. But if I can get that perfect scenario of players, then happy days. I'm going to play this and I'm going to have a solid, good time, because there's a lot of cool things in this game. I just wish it didn't take you so long to get to the good bits. It's, in fact, actually, cool blimey, I could summarize this, it's Andor. This game is Andor, the Star Wars show. It's got the exact same characteristics. It's loved by a ton of people, but it is also way too long. It has some really solid moments, but you have to spend ages to get to the solid moments. It's the Andor series. There's like AAA rating scenes in Andor, but you gotta go through a massive slog of unnecessary side plots and characters and that in order to get to those really awesome moments. This game's the same. You've got cool card play, you've got some cool endgame stuff, you've got some good variety in that, but man, do you have to go through a lot of time in order to get to those moments, and for me, it's just too much for not enough.
I just want to talk to him.
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Check out the rest of my channel, and by all means check out the Hegemony review. I mean, you've seen me go pros and cons on this one. You want to see me go absolutely goo gaga, then watch my Hegemony review, because that one I certainly do. And, you know, this one is still a solid game. It's just, I think it's going to be one that's difficult to get played for me. But by all means, let me know your comments down below. Do you care about the length? You know, I'm not going to believe that you can play this in 2 hours with 4 players, okay? That's not going to happen. But if you don't care about the length, then by all means say why in the comments. If this game's going to put you off because of the length, say why in the comments, you know. But I would like to also hear about other aspects that you like and dislike about the game, mechanically and theme-wise. You know, does the theme come out more strongly for you? Do you find it more interactive than I felt it? You know, by all means, let's get all your discussion points down below, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some arguing happening. But until next time, remember, it's only a game, and I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple video. So take care, everyone.